All right, let's get back to reading chapter 6 here. I got my raviolis all made. They're in the freezer. So when I make raviolis, ooh, don't want it to fuzz over. Having myself some bubbly water. So when I make raviolis, I generally make them before we're going to have them. So of course you have to make them before you have them. You can't have them and then make them. It doesn't work that way. No, but I'll make them and I put them in the freezer and then I drop them frozen into the water to cook them. And anyway, they're in there in the freezer right now. I have them all. I made 2 dozen. So 1 little tub of ricotta with all the other stuff in it, and 1 batch of dough, 3 cups of semolina, and 3 cups of, and 3 eggs. Gives you 2 dozen good sized raviolis. And so that's like 4 servings, 6 raviolis each. So I washed my nose and cheeks, and I put on some anti-itch cream, but I don't know, we'll see. Maybe it's this weird, I got this weird mood change lipstick. See, it looks blue, but it's not, which tells you, see, it goes on pink. So it tells you that there's some crazy chemical in here. So we'll see if my nose starts itching. Oh, this apron I'm wearing. So this apron is made out of a bunch of other aprons that I used to have, right? So there's like 4 different aprons here. Where's the pocket? Pockets on here. Like 4 different aprons, right? And they were worn out, and so I cut them up and recycled the parts of the fabric that were still usable. So it's reversible. And I made it big enough so I can get old and fat, and it'll still fit me. Or I should say older and fatter. So where were we? We were reading In My Kitchen on My Table, Lenten Tales of Culinary Traditions. We're continuing chapter 6. So, making the pepper jelly was fun. I had bought a jar of pepper jelly at the farmer's market and had shared the experience with my maternal grandmother over the phone because I thought it was something unusual. To my surprise, she told me she loved pepper jelly. I knew my grandmother loved jelly and marmalade. She always had a few different flavors in the refrigerator. What I didn't know was that her mother had made both marmalade and pepper jelly. I didn't know that. She said she hadn't had pepper jelly since she was a girl. So that's how I decided to make pepper jelly that Christmas. Pepper sauce, specifically chili sauce, is a very important part of making tamales. The chili sauces in the photo on the previous page are both made from the same batch. What makes them different is the one on the right has all the skins and seeds removed, while the one on the left contains the skins and what seeds remained after seeding the chilies for processing. So, if the book ever gets published, then you'll get to see the picture. Seeding chilies is a difficult process, but that is done by Seeding chilies is a difficult process that is best done by hand. But no matter how careful you are, I think it's impossible to remove all seeds unless you are using industrial equipment. I suppose if you are a novice, you could wear some gloves. But really, it's totally impractical to wear gloves. You just need to toughen up and do it. When seeding chilies, you roll the chili between your fingers, first breaking the pod membranes inside. Then you break the chili open and slide your thumb and thumbnail through the pod, allowing the seeds to fall out into a bowl. As long as your pods aren't smoked or fried and the fruit hasn't originated from GE seeds, the seeds should be viable and ready to plant to grow more peppers. You can opt to keep your seeds in the pods and either grind them into powder or leave whole, but you need to understand there are a whole lot of seeds inside of each chili. And small chilies can have just as many seeds as larger ones. So the ratio of seed to pepper mass is closer in smaller chilies. Also, part of the pepper's heat is in any fine connective membrane covering each individual seed itself. So the seeds add heat. A pepper's skin and flesh can hold heat too, but the highest concentration of heat in a pepper is in the connective membrane around the seeds and the delicate core stem. These seeds are the seeds are edible. It just comes down to function, texture, and personal taste. Everything has its place. The sauces in the previous photo are made using a blend of chili japonese and chili nuevo Mexico. While it most certainly has a decent level of heat, it was made as a sweet sauce, not a savory one. Both sugar and honey were added in the cooking process to develop the flavors. This is always an option, but sweet hot sauces are not common or traditional parts of American chili sauces. Sweet hot sauces are more commonly found in Asian and Caribbean cooking. I found this particular sauce to be lovely paired with ripe soft cheeses on toast, as well as components in making other sauces like teriyaki and barbecue, both of which I have used to finish fresh fish that has been steamed or grilled. The chili sauce I make from my nopal, cactus, y queso, tamales is savory and hot. You can adapt the heat of your chili sauce by using different chilies. The most laborious part is removing the skins and seeds. To do this, I use an implement that is a large wire mesh strainer with a crank and roller that press the cooked material through the screen, separating out the liquid sauce from the more fibrous parts. I'm sure it has a specific name, but I don't know what it is. I purchased mine at a kitchenware shop called Sur la Table. I purchased it when I made my first batch of tomato ketchup after my pappy explained to me what happened with Heinz. He told me how his mother made hers and described the implement to me. It has come in very handy in making jams and sauces of many types since then, especially chili sauces for tamales. Leaving the seeds in and then straining will add some heat, but in the end, it will also yield a smaller amount of sauce because some sauce will stick to the seeds. You could also opt to grind the chilies whole into a fine powder before cooking, but the texture of the finished sauce is not nearly as nice, in my opinion. Besides, you will need to use the strainer anyway to strain out other woody spices, so this is how you make chili sauce for my tamales. Ingredients: 1 large bag of chili de árbol seeded and stems removed, 1 large bag of chili guajillo seeded and stems removed, 1 medium-sized yellow onion diced, 1 medium-sized red onion diced, 1/4 cup raw pumpkin seeds, 2-inch piece of fresh ginger minced, 1 star anise, 2 bay leaves, 1 tablespoon coriander seed, 3 whole allspice, 1 cinnamon stick, 1 teaspoon dried ground hoya santa, 2 tablespoons dried marjoram, 1 teaspoon dried ground salvia, half a tablespoon ground cumin, 2 heads of garlic minced fine, 1 stick butter, 1 tablespoon whole black peppercorns, salt to taste, 1 lime quartered, enough water. Place your seeded chilies in a large metal, glass, or ceramic mixing bowl and cover with water by at least 2 inches. I don't know the weight of the bags of chilies, but when I find them at the market, the bag is a two-sided pouch about the size of a standard size sheet of printer paper and heat sealed at either end. Cover the soaking chilies with a plate or plastic wrap and allow it to sit overnight on the counter. Oh, it might be the lipstick. It might be the lipstick. Well, that'll be easy if that's all it is. Next morning, in a deep, heavy stock pot, put butter, onions, pumpkin seeds, and all the spices. Fry the spices over high heat, stirring continually until they become aromatic but not burned. Pour the chilies in their water over the spices and stir well. Cover over high heat and bring to a boil. Once the pot has come to a boil, add the lime quarters. Stir well. Reduce the heat to medium and allow to simmer until everything is very tender and starting to thicken some. Taste and add the salt. Allow to simmer for 15 more minutes, then test for salt again. Turn the heat off. Using an immersion blender, blend the contents of the pot well. Once the sauce is a consistent texture with small chunks of pepper skins, use the strainer to remove large pieces and reserve the sauce in a second pot. The chunky part of the sauce that is drained out can be dried in dehydrator, then ground into powder to be used as seasoning in other dishes and sauces. This recipe makes enough sauce for approximately 20 tamales. If you aren't making tamales right away, the sauce can be frozen or canned for use at a later date. This sauce can also be used to finish roasted meats. If you are using different chilies and spices to make a sweet hot chili sauce for use in Asian-style dishes, the sugar and or honey are added at the same time as the soaked chilies. For sweet hot sauces, I recommend doubling the amount of lime and ginger and using 3 cups of sugar or honey or a mixture thereof. You may also opt to stir through a 1/4 cup cornstarch to thicken the sauce further. This process can be messy, and chilies may temporarily stain porous surfaces, plastic tools, and hands. Stains on clothes may be more permanent if not addressed immediately with some type of stain treatment. The next thing to consider is the rest of your filling for your tamales. If you would like to have meat in your tamales, pulled pork is traditionally paired with this sauce, but I suspect pulled turkey, shredded beef, or even goat would pair well also. You must roast meat separately, then add the pulled and deboned meat to the sauce and set it aside when you make the masa, but we aren't quite there yet. I make a vegetarian filling of cactus. Cactus is a surprisingly lovely vegetable. It is similar in flavor and texture to okra. This dish is best prepared using brined cactus. If you are using fresh cactus, you will need to either cook it or brine it yourself. The brining process for this dish only needs to be overnight, but you can, of course, allow the vegetable to brine longer or even ferment it. When using fresh cactus, the pads of many varietals may be used, but only of varietals that produce the prickly pear fruit. In Spanish, this fruit is called tuna. Cactus fruit is delicious, but you need to navigate many hard seeds and most certainly thorns. You can eat the seeds, just don't bite down on them. You might crack a tooth. When ripe, the flesh of the fruit is soft enough to mush against the roof of your mouth with your tongue and is lightly sweet and refreshing in flavor. Slice off a thin piece off the top and bottom of the fruit and peel off the outer layer to reveal the edible part. Cactus fruit is farmed and used as filler in juices and jams and is recommended as a remedy by some herbalists for those with blood sugar regulating issues. You can also make cactus jam. The fruits, when ripe, can either be red or green, so you must know what color of fruit your cactus produces. Fruits that are ripe when red start off as green. The fruit is popular in Central and South America as well as in North Africa, but we don't use the fruits when making tamales, unless perhaps you are making one of the sweet varieties. But I have never actually tasted any of the sweet varieties. Sweet fruit tamales are traditionally steamed in banana leaves and come from a Mexico state that borders the Gulf of Mexico, though I'm not sure which state it is for sure. You'd need to ask someone from Mexico about that. If you are harvesting your own cactus, choose the youngest, most tender pads. A plant should be well established before you begin harvesting from its arms. Wear leather gloves. You might not see any spines, but they are there. And once they get in your fingers, they are next to impossible to remove, and they hurt. This is the same for the fruits. Using a knife, cut the pad at its base, slice off any large spines, then rub the pad between a thick towel or 2 pieces of leather you reserve specifically for this purpose. Then, rinse the cactus pad and set it aside. You can also find fresh cactus pads in the market sometimes. They are seasonal in the late spring, but can often be found year-round. If fresh cactus is not available to you, it can be found cut in thin strips and brined in jars at most Mexican markets. Purchasing jars of cactus eliminates the risk of thorns and takes a few time-consuming steps out of the preparation process. So this is what you do. Ingredients: 2 large jars of brined cactus or 10 to 12 young cactus pads plus 4 to 5 tablespoons brining salt, 3 whole garlic cloves, enough water. If you are using... wiped off that lipstick and with this tissue, and now I'm using this tissue to rub my nose. Not very smart, Larissa. Not very smart. Directions. If you are using already brined cactus, all you need to do is drain it and add the cactus strips to your chili sauce and stir it well. Then it is ready to use in your tamales. If you have fresh cactus, rinse the pads in cold water, then cut into 1/4 inch wide strips and place in a large mixing bowl. Cactus is like okra in that it has a mucus-like liquid inside. I'm just preparing you. It's kind of like the jelly in an aloe, but not exactly. It's more similar to okra. Once all of the pads are cut into strips, cover them with cold water and swish them around some. Then drain off this water. You could drink and consume it for medicinal purposes. but you don't have to. It doesn't really taste great at this point. Add the salt and garlic and cover with tepid water. Cover the bowl with a large plate or plastic wrap and allow to sit in the refrigerator overnight. Remove the garlic cloves and drain the mixed cactus with chilies remove the garlic cloves and drain and mix the cactus with chili sauce with the chili sauce you prepare. You can choose to allow the cactus to brine longer, even up to a week before using. The longer you brine the cactus, the more tender it becomes. This recipe makes enough for approximately 20 tamales. Now, it's time to talk about the masa. Masa for tamales is different from the masa bread. Traditionally, masa dough made for tamales is prepared using lard. Manteca is a popular brand. I don't use this, however. Instead, I use either Earth Balanced Original Flavor, a vegan product, or unsalted Irish butter. Both make a lovely end result, but I can say I prefer the Irish butter. If you use butter, it must be Irish butter. The product is different from other butters. It is much richer and has little to absolutely no water. This is why it makes such a lovely tamale masa and pastry. Some of the Mexican women I have known who make tamales use Crisco to make vegetarian options. Like making bread dough, making masa for tamales is all about texture and feel. I can't tell you exactly how much of anything really goes into it because it depends on the texture of the masa flour you are using as well as humidity and elevation. The texture you are looking for ultimately is a thick ball that has just come together and doesn't feel greasy when smeared between your thumb and first two fingers. This is how I was taught. But I suppose I'm getting ahead of myself once again. So this is how you do it. Ingredients: 2 bricks Irish butter or 1 large tub of Earth Balanced Original Flavor butter substitute. Enough salt. Enough room temperature water. 1 5-pound bag of masa flour. Directions: allow the butter to come to room temperature, then cut into small cubes. Fill a pitcher with tepid water. In a large bowl, pour half the bag of flour and fluff it loosely with your hand. Add a handful of salt. Yes, a handful. Now, add the butter and start working it through the flour as you would in a pastry dough. Once the flour and butter are evenly combined, start adding water a cup at a time, working it into the dough. You don't want to add too much water. This will make your dough sticky, and this dough is not meant to be sticky. What you want is for the dough to just come together into a soft mass in your bowl. It should be almost fluffy looking and not seem greasy. When you smear it between your fingers, it should be smooth, but not greasy, sticky, or gooey. If you need to add a bit more flour, do so, but in 1/4 cup increments. You also don't want this dough to be too dry. Nobody likes dry tamales. Yuck. Once you have it to the right texture, taste it for salt and adjust if needed. Cover the dough with a damp towel and allow it to rest for 10 minutes while you prepare your station to assemble the tamales. Now you're almost ready to assemble your tamales, but there are 2 important things we haven't talked about: cheese and corn husks. When making these tamales, cheese is very important. Traditionally, with a de árbol chili sauce, Oaxaca string cheese is used. If you can't find this, you can just use good old string cheese prepackaged for kids' lunches. You will need 2 pounds of Oaxaca string cheese or 2 12-ounce bags of prepackaged string cheese. Oaxaca string cheese is very similar to dry mozzarella cheese used for shredding and covering pizzas, and it melts the same way also. Oaxaca string cheese comes from the state of Oaxaca in Mexico. It is formed into long, rounded logs, is made from a combination of cow's and sheep's milk, and melts really well. Sure, you could also use queso fresco or cotija, but they are saltier than the string cheese, don't melt in a gooey way, and tend to disappear into the masa and filling when tamales are steamed. You can also opt to fill your tamales with pieces of string cheese and strips of fresh-cut veggies like sweet peppers and zucchini or fermented carrots and jalapenos. When doing this, you don't need to add any sauce. It's really just a matter of taste. Now, to address the most important part of the tamale, the corn husk. The corn husk is the wrapper in which the tamale is cooked and served. It is not consumed. It's far too fibrous, though I guess if you were really hungry, it wouldn't kill you. Corn husks are purchased in dried bagged bunches and should be soaked overnight, submerged in water in a large plastic bucket. You will need to weigh the top of the husks down with a plate or other large, heavy item to keep them from floating up. If you forget to soak your husks overnight, you can, in a pinch, soak them for a few hours in boiling water, but you will have more breakage when wrapping the tamales. So this is how you do it. Ingredients: prepared masa dough, 2 bags corn husks soaked overnight, prepared cactus and chili sauce filling, 2 pounds string cheese portioned into 20 equal-sized pieces. Directions: choose a corn husk. You can use a single wide husk or 2 or 3 smaller ones layered slightly over each other in an overlapping manner, with the small point pointing towards you and the wide side pointing away from you. I've got some Benadryl cream, anti-itch. My itchy nose. It's terrible. I have to wash my face again. Take a handful of the masa and press it in a round shape in the center of the husk, flattening it with your palm. Lay a piece of string cheese across the masa. Cover the string cheese with a serving spoonful of the cactus and chili sauce. Now, fold the sides of the husk in, wrapping the filling in the masa, and tuck the small pointed end up into the mass of the masa. If the husk is large enough, you may also choose to tuck the top as well. If you are having trouble securing the husk into a neat little package, you can peel a thin strip of husk from another husk and use it to tie the tamale together. Stand the tamales tall-wise into the top level of a steaming pot. Once the pot is packed tightly, put on the lid, bring the water to a boil, and steam the tamales for 20 minutes. Serve with sour cream, salsa fresca, a side salad of shaved cabbage, cilantro, salt and lemon juice, and a glass of sangria or a shot of tequila. This recipe makes approximately 20 tamales, depending on how big you make them. A tamale is very filling. I usually can't eat more than 2 without feeling like I'm going to explode. This is a very difficult process. On your first try or 2, they may not be pretty, but if you follow the recipe, they will taste good. Tamales in the corn husk can also be wrapped individually in wax paper and foil and frozen. They can be steamed from a frozen state, but they take an hour or more to cook fully if steamed from frozen. If you are going to make your own tamales, you might as well make your own salsa fresca. It's not that hard. Just dice a few ripe tomatoes, removing the seeds, dice a fresh jalapeno fine, chop up 3 or 4 green onions and a few cloves of fresh garlic and a bunch of fresh cilantro. Toss this all together with a tablespoon of salt, the juice of 2 fresh limes, and tablespoon of sesame oil, and allow to marinate together for a while. It's good. The tamales are so good. They're so good. They take so much time to make, though. They're really involved. And I don't know. They're more difficult than, I'd say the easiest thing to wrap are cabbage leaves. I think cabbage leaves are the easiest thing because they're big and they're already kind of curved, and as long as you've steamed them, they just roll right up when you're stuffing them. Tamales, because you have the masa and you're wrapping them in that corn husk. The corn husk doesn't lend itself very easily to the process, and so it takes some finesse. And I think after tamales, I'd say grape leaves are the most difficult. After that, grape leaves are a pain in the butt because if you have them, you got to get them. They're packed real tight in the jar, and you got to pull them out of the jar unless you're using fresh grape leaves from your own garden, and then you still have to steam them because they're far too fibrous if they're not cooked, right, or brined. But I prefer, one time I made grape leaves using fresh leaves that I blanched and brined. And the flavor wasn't so much better that I thought it was worth it. So it's just easier to get a jar of, they look like big green cigars packed in water. And you got to work them out of there without tearing them, right? And you got to loosen them up in a bowl of water, fluff them up, and peel all the leaves apart. We do stuffed apples on the grill too. They're really good. So this morning I was really sad to hear about what happened to Abe in Japan. That's crazy. I hadn't seen that they've released the name of the guy that they picked up for doing it. So the guy's like 41 years old. Wonder what his deal is. I don't know. I guess we're going to find out, aren't we? It's been a while since we've had an assassination. When was the last assassination? I don't know. Maybe there's assassinations all the time. We just don't hear about them. That's probably the case. Anyway. Next chapter. Chapter 7. I'm not going to read it right now. I'll wait until like tomorrow to do it. But it's Pierogi, Halushka, Holupki, and Paska. Dobro. The other thing that I've been watching stories about, there's this guy in Canada who is being awarded by the government compensation for the harm that was done to him by the COVID vaccine. He's like all crippled up now, and I've been following these stories about life insurance companies all across the United States in the past year have seen a 40% across the board increase in deaths that are non-COVID related. I wonder what it's related to. What have they been forcing everybody to do? Yeah. Anyway. Have a good rest of your day. Have a good weekend. Whatever.